Well, good afternoon. My name is John Hocknull. I'm a former patrol officer in Papua New Guinea, and this is my charming wife, Morag, down here, and you'll be hearing from her later on in the cruise. By way of introduction, how many members of Cruise PNG Facebook group are here? Okay, anybody that's got their hand up that's in Cruise PNG, if you're sitting next to them, ask them the questions. They've got the answers. Well, we'll get the show on the road. This first presentation is an introduction to Papua New Guinea. It's going to take you back 70,000 years and bring you forward to today, and I sincerely hope that you enjoy it. For the balance of the cruise, though, tomorrow at 1:15 again, I'll be coming up and making a presentation on the life and work of a patrol officer in Papua New Guinea. And tomorrow there's at 3 p.m. there's a Q&A in the Blue Room, as there is today. So hold all your questions until after the presentation, and see you in the Blue Room at 3 o'clock, and I'll answer as many questions as I can. Then when we leave the conflict islands, Morag will be making her presentation on what it was like to be the wife of a patrol officer during the time we were there, and what happened, because we always get asked, what did you do when you left Papua New Guinea, and she'll touch on that. And then for the last day, I'll be making a presentation on fascinating land, fascinating people, fascinating culture. Subtext, customs, cults, and cannibalism. So if you want to learn all about that, come along on the last sea day. I'm not telling you about it before we get there. Okay. The island of New Guinea is the second largest island in the world. For all you trivia buffs, if you get asked what's the second largest island, it's the island of New Guinea. Left hand side is a place called either Papua, West Papua, Irian Jaya. It's gone through a myriad of names. And on the right hand side is Papua New Guinea. Now I'm going to concentrate mainly on Papua New Guinea. There's a little bit about West Papua there. Any more seats around these people standing up? Put your hands up and give them a yell. I'll come down and see you. Don't want you to be standing there for the next 45 minutes. So, just some statistics about Papua New Guinea itself. They had a recent census a couple of years ago in Papua New Guinea, and they reckoned there was 8 million population. I spoke with the people that were taking the census, and they reckon they missed about 20% of them. So we're probably looking at nearer a population of 10 million people. The language in Papua New Guinea is English, so when you get to Alatau, you'll have no real problem speaking English, and the same with Rabaul. But in Rabaul there's a reasonable amount of Pidgin English spoken in Rabaul. The island of the Papua New Guinea segment of it, for you Victorians, twice the size of Victoria, okay? And almost twice the size of New Zealand. So that'll give you an idea of the size of the place. When we were there were very, very few roads, so we had to walk everywhere. Very long coastline. The most intriguing thing about Papua New Guinea, though, is that there are over 850 totally different languages. They're not dialects. It's not like being in the UK where you've got people from up north and people from down south. You've got totally different languages. And as a result of having 850 different languages, there are 850 different cultures. And this particular image here sort of shows you the mountain range that runs through the spine of Papua New Guinea and into Irian Jaya. So up in the highlands, there's some high peaks up there. But the reason I've done this is to show you this next slide, which is my little touch on what is now called Papua, or Irian Jaya, or West Papua. This is the Indonesian side. Now the Indonesians invaded in 1963 and they took it off from the Dutch. The Dutch weren't particularly worried about it. If they'd realised what was there, they might have fought a little bit harder to keep it. But right in the middle, you see a little red dot there. That's actually a mine site. It's one of the largest mines in the world. You see down on that river there, that bottom there, that's where all the tailings from that mine have gone. And it's the Freeport mine. It's an American owned and run mine. And this will give you an idea of the size. Now this is from space. So you can see this hole from space. It's huge. Probably the third biggest hole in the world. And if you have a look down the rim there, I can't use my pointer because it doesn't work on these screens. There are 21 of the huge dump trucks that they use in Australian mining, massive trucks. Well, there's 21 of those parked along the rim of the mine down there. So I'll give you an idea of the size of it. It's massive. That's what's keeping a lot of the Indonesian government in power. They put down any kind of argument or insurgents very, very rapidly. So the local people in Papua are under a very firm thumb. Now, actually, there's 700 languages in Papua, 850 in Papua New Guinea. So the whole of the island of New Guinea, you've 1,500 totally different languages there. Now, back to Papua New Guinea itself. The Papua New Guinea's highest mountain is Mount Wilhelm. It's up near Mount Hagen. Sikik River flows from the south-north, and the Fly River flows from the north-south. If you've heard of Optidi mine, well, that's on the headwaters of the Fly River. Well over 600 different islands and atolls. And it's only 4 kilometres from the border of Australia. Saibai Island is the furthest north piece of Australia. 4 kilometres from Saibai Island is mainland Papua New Guinea. So there's a fair bit of work monitoring that particular bit of coastline. Currently, there's some major problems in Papua New Guinea with tuberculosis and possibly polio. And so the Australian government is actually going to build a fairly decent sized hospital in Daru, which is to treat as many TB patients as possible to stop them getting in dinghies and coming across to the island. So, we'll look here at another map. Now, on the right-hand side, just up to the right of the A in New Guinea, there's an island called Bougainville. Bougainville Island is an autonomous province of Papua New Guinea, and later on this year they're supposed to be having a referendum to work out whether they want to stay with Papua New Guinea or whether they want to become an independent nation. If they become an independent nation, the likelihood is that they'll be called the North Solomon. Country will be the North Solomon Islands, because to the right, you'll see the Solomon Islands to the right. They won't join with the Solomon Islands. If they part, the hopes of the government is that they stay with Papua New Guinea. The Bougainville copper mine that closed down after they had the civil war in Bougainville has actually all been handed back to the people. So BHP has no interest whatsoever in Bougainville now. It all belongs to the local autonomous authority. Now, from a geographic point of view, Papua New Guinea sits right on the Ring of Fire. That's all the volcanic activity around from New Zealand right round the Pacific, down the west coast of South America. And poor old Hawaii is right in the middle. So those little red dots there are current active volcanoes in that particular region. There's a couple of big ones in Indonesia that keep causing problems, and recently they had the one in Bali. There was a couple of people killed when it erupted. But just in Papua New Guinea itself, these are active volcanoes in Papua New Guinea. We're not going to. The only one we're going to see is up in Rabaul, Mount Tavuru up in Rabaul. But down in Alito, if I scurry across here, if you can see me, we're going down into here into Alito and up to Rabaul, and we're going into the Trobriand Islands here. Now there's an island, this volcano here, Mount Lamington. I'll tell you a little bit about that. For the older members in the audience, they may know about what happened in Mount Lamington in 1951. That's the biggest volcanic explosion that's ever happened anywhere near Australia. And at that time, there were over 3,000 people killed when it was a pyroclastic explosion. People remember Mount St Helens when it went up and it just flattened everything. Same thing happened in Mount Lamington. And you can see the results on the right there. There's a truck stuck up in a big tree. When that volcano erupted, 4 patrol officers, 4 guys doing the same work that I did, up there they were killed at that time when the volcano erupted. Now we're going to Rabaul. And this is the actual eruption in 94. Now, people think of just one volcano that erupted and covered Rabaul. There were 2 of them. You can see 2 columns of smoke there. The one in the foreground is the one that you're going to see. The one in the background, you don't see that smoking anymore. But this is what you'll see when you get there. Now, if you go up to the observatory, you'll see all the instruments that they use that are monitoring the different volcanoes around Papua New Guinea. Now, that brown area in the front is now turned green. They've planted a whole pile of coconuts and everything there. But underneath that brown is where the town used to be. If and when you get back on another cruise ship, and P&O may reintroduce the cruises that go up to Madang and Wewak, you'll go past these islands off the Madang coast. The one on the right hand side is an extinct volcano. That's a freshwater lake in the middle of it in the caldera. And it's called Long Island, and the main reason it's called Long Island is when the original sailing ships came through in the 16th, 17th century, they could only sail a peak, a long island and a peak. And they had no idea that it was actually circular. They just thought that it was a flat, long island. The one on the left, Manam Island, that actually erupted again last month. Last month. But my first job when I went up to Papua New Guinea was to administer that volcanic island. There you go, have a volcano and look after that. Thank you very much. But on the 2015 on the Pacific Dawn, we went past Manam Island in the daytime. Normally, going from Madang to Wewak, you actually pass Manam at about midnight. But what happened was we went up to Wewak, we couldn't get in, turned around, came back, and I spent about an hour and a half on the bridge talking about the work I did on Manam Island. So it really astounded me when we went and saw what the last major explosion did, because it just about took half of the top of the island blew off. Quite amazing. But this is a sunset. The sun's setting over the mainland, and to the right you see the island there. That's smoke that's still coming. The wind is blowing the smoke away from the island. At the same time, in 2018, we went back up again, and there was this little island decided to gurgle and pop. Cordova. This is just outside of Welac, and you might be able to see down on the horizon there, you see some, looks like smoke on the horizon in the foreground of the island. That's actually steam. There's a vent underneath the water, and as the lava's coming up, it's flowing out, and it's just turning the water into steam. But going from there, there's a place called the Witu Islands, which is just west of Rabaul. Some cruises go in there. You can actually go inside the caldera of the island, and the ship goes in, does a 360, and goes back out again. So that's quite a marvellous little adventure in there. When the ship horn goes inside the caldera, the echo just bounces around for probably 15 minutes. It just goes on and on and on. But all of this volcanic activity, you might, people that are interested in geology probably would recall there was a volcano that suddenly erupted outside of Tonga and created a brand new island off Tonga. And over the years that's actually expanded and joined together with another little island next door. And slowly the vegetation from that little island is making its way over onto the new island created. But when that island exploded off Tonga, it created, everybody knows what pumice stone is. Everybody's got some in my bathroom for doing their feet. Well, that island, when that island exploded, it created a 7,500 square kilometre floating island of pumice stone. Pumice stone will actually float under the water by about that height. So that's 7,500 square kilometres of pumice stone floating in the sea. Eventually that broke up, and anybody here live on Bribey Island and on Fraser Island? Go for a wander along the beach there, you can pick up pieces of pumice stone. That's all come from Tonga. So it's a long trip across there. So that's a little bit about the geography and the geology of Papua New Guinea and the region. We'll move on to some ancient history. Now, Papua New Guineans, the people living on Papua New Guinea Island, or the island of New Guinea, for well over 50,000 years. They're probably looking at 70,000 years. Now, looking in the audience, I would say there's probably 90% at least of the people in the audience have got European descent, and as a result of that, they've probably got 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA in your makeup. As a Homo sapien, they got together with the Neanderthals, had a party around a campfire, and nature took its course, and with the inbreeding of the Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens, that's what, as I say, 85% of us have got Neanderthal DNA. Papua New Guineans, a little bit different. They discovered a group, another species of hominin who live way up in the Asian mountains up in Siberia, and they discovered this race of the hominins, and they're called the Denisovan hominins. Now those ended up having a party with the Homo sapiens came out of Africa and across into Asia, and so they ended up breeding there, and so therefore they end up with, in Papua New Guinea, they have about a 6% Denisovan DNA in their structure. So from a DNA perspective, there's differences between Europeans, Africans, Papua New Guineans, and the Denisovan DNA goes right the way through to Fiji. So that'll just give you an idea of the makeup, the DNA makeup of the difference between Papua New Guineans and others. Now, a visible difference between Papua New Guineans and other places is this. Now, that's not peroxide hair, that's a natural hair colour of blonde. And when two people have got the gene TYRP1, and they've got that and they get together, there's a very good likelihood they end up with blonde-haired kids. And you'll see blonde children and blonde adults in Papua New Guinea, and you wonder whether they're actually been putting peroxide in. Well, that's not the case. They may have, but it's unlikely. If it's natural blonde, it's because of this gene that they've got. Now, as far as Papua New Guinea is concerned, or the island of New Guinea is concerned, they have the world's oldest agriculture there, well over, getting pretty close to 10,000 years old. This is true farming, true cultivation, before the Egyptians, before the Mesopotamians, before any of those. They were actually had proper agriculture happening in Papua New Guinea. So they've been growing stuff there for an awful long time and looking after the gardens for an awful long time. So it's some amazing things you actually find out when you do a little bit of digging about Papua New Guinea. In the anthropologists and the like, they dug some trenches in a place called Cook, K-U-K, and they actually did testing and isotope aging of things like sweet potato pollen and other bits and pieces to find that they had actually been cultivating, deliberately cultivating, not hunter-gathering, but they actually worked at farming. They found 300 years ago that, well, they traced back the pollen for sweet potato. In the highlands, they used to just have yams and taro, which are pretty ordinary kind of vegetables. But they found that the pollen of sweet potatoes is probably the oldest there, about 300 years. And as a result of the sweet potato going into the highlands, the population just went through the roof. And when Europeans were looking at the island of New Guinea, they spent a fair bit of time around the coast, and they thought, well, there's not a lot of people live here. They had absolutely no idea that in the highlands of Papua New Guinea there's probably 10 times the population in the highlands as there was around the coast. So when the first patrols went there in the late 20s, early 30s, they were astounded at the population there. Now here's a couple of interesting things. We've got a few trivia buffs here. Who can tell me what the world's largest herb is? That's the world's largest herb. It actually started in Papua New Guinea, or in the island of New Guinea. They've got 2,000 or 3,000 different species of banana in Papua New Guinea. This is the plantains, cooking bananas, all of those things. They've got more species of banana in New Guinea than anywhere else. Currently, the University of Queensland is doing some genetic modification, not through crossbreeding with blower fish or whatever else, just within the banana species itself, to produce bananas that are high in vitamin A, so that they can send it over to Africa and they can get the Africans to grow and eat these bananas, which helps them with their health situation. They've got a banana that you open it up and it's bright red. It's full of beta carotene. So when you go ashore, if you're on a tour or whatever, you go near the markets, if you see, everybody knows what ladyfinger bananas look like. Well, they've got even smaller ones in Papua New Guinea. They might only be 2 inches long, little chubby fat bananas. Get some of them. They'll only cost a couple of kina, a pound of them. They're the sweetest, most delicious bananas you've ever eaten. Absolutely fantastic. Conversely, on Kirawina, there is a species of banana on Kirawina. It's the weirdest looking banana you've ever seen. But the leaves that they use on that particular banana, the women make their money out of this particular leaf, and I'll explain a little bit about that later on. But one of the things that tourists tend to do when they go to Papua New Guinea is they tend to take bags full of Chupa Chups and Minties and things like that. And say, these little children, they'll all love these lollies. No, they won't. Main reason why? Sugar was invented, or first grew, a grass. It's a grass, and it started off in Papua New Guinea, and it was taken to the rest of the world from there. On the banana side of things, you know the bananas we all get from Coles and Woolies or whatever? What's the name of the species of that one? Cavendish banana. You know where Cavendish bananas come from? The UK. There was some lord decided to pick up half a dozen different species of bananas. He took them back to his place, crossbred the bananas, came up with one that was nice and edible and everything else. Lord Cavendish was his name. He gave you the Cavendish banana. So if you think that bananas come from Queensland, Cavendish bananas started in the UK. Sugar, again, as it started there, but as I say, please, whatever you do, this is a lady who took great delight in taking a huge bag of Chupa Chups off the ship and spent all her time wandering around handing out Chupa Chups to the kids. The mums are too polite to tell you to put them away and not give them to the kids. The kids just like something sweet. Problem is that they start, get a Chupa Chup and put it in their mouth and they'll bite, break their teeth, no dentists, and they end up with no end of trouble. So Papua New Guinea is actually full of different things. Here's one here. This is a fruit of a pandanus tree. It's called marita, and that's bright red fruit in it. And when the Gordon Ramsays and the Rosenthal's and all these celebrity chefs get to hear about this thing, that's going to be the next superfood. So you heard it first here, folks. A big superfood is going to come. So I give you an idea about that side of things about Papua New Guinea. We'll move on to European involvement in Papua New Guinea. Now, the first Europeans, the Portuguese sailing ships went through there in the 16th century, and also into the bird's head of New Guinea, which is that bit that sticks out the left-hand side, the Indonesian side, and because the Portuguese were really interested in the spice trade from there. Well, they got to New Guinea and they couldn't find any spice. They found lots of bananas and sugar, so they took that away with them. But they also found birds of paradise skins at the markets. This is a painting of the first, it's the first painting of a bird of paradise that they actually got in an auction house in Amsterdam. And they had this auction back in 1522, and they had the painting there, and the work that the Papua New Guineans do when they actually skin a bird of paradise and prepare it and present it is absolutely brilliant. So much so that when the Dutch got this at the auction house, they thought, well, where are the wings? There's no wings on this bird of paradise that we're selling. And not only was there no wings, there were no legs or feet. So it confused them completely. Just this big, beautiful plumage at the back end. So there's no wings, no legs or feet. How did they fly? How did they settle? How did they mate? How did they feed? Were all the questions that were going through these 16th century brains. Oh, it's come from a place so far away we know nothing about it. These birds must live in paradise. So that's how the name bird of paradise came into being as a generic term for all things to do with birds of paradise. But prior to World War I, this was the political structure in Papua New Guinea. The Dutch had the left-hand bit. The top bit was run by the Germans, and the British, through Queensland, looked after the bottom bit. Now, the top bit was German New Guinea, the bottom bit was British New Guinea, which later turned to Papua. Now, You see the line that divides all three of them? The line goes down there and there's a little kink in the line. That little kink is the Fly River. So they knew that when they were looking at it, that the line would go down and they'd hit the river, follow the river and then take it down. Why is that a straight line with a little kink in it, you ask? I hear you ask. Anyway, this is the reason why. If you have a look at the island of New Guinea up the top there, the red arrow, and it's next to that line. If you follow that line straight down, it actually goes to the Victorian South Australian border. And that's the 141st parallel east. And that was invented, believe it or not, in 1494, long before anybody even got to this part of the world, by the Portuguese and the Spanish. We all know about South America. We know that Brazil is Portuguese, and then west of Brazil is Spanish. And that's how they divvied up the world. The Portuguese said, well, we'll have this bit, and you have that bit. And this is they made a treaty back in 1494 to actually divide up anything that they found in the east. So therefore, you ended up with the Spanish looking after the Philippines, and the Portuguese looking after Timor-Leste, and the Dutch bought the Spice Islands off the Portuguese. So that's why that line is the way it is. Fascinating when you check a few of these things out. But this is a brief history of Papua New Guinea since European involvement, very brief. The Germans held the New Guinea side until 1914. The British right away till 1906 when Australia took over administration. And then we've got obviously the First War, Second War, and during the Second War there was an administration called Angao, and after that you ended up with the territory of Papua New Guinea, which was from 1946 after the war through to 1975 when Papua New Guinea received its independence. In World War I, the reason why Australia got involved was the proverbial hit the fan in Europe, and what the Germans had was a fabulous network of radio stations around the world. And what they wanted to do is to interrupt all of that activity through the spoil the radio communications for the Germans. So Australia hurriedly got together a reservist force of naval reservists from Queensland, and they took off up to Rabaul where this big radio set was, and that's the place called Bitapaka. And Bitapaka is where the war cemetery is. If you're going to the Rabaul and you're getting out to the war cemetery, beautiful, beautiful place out there. So the very first casualties for Australia during World War I was in Rabaul. There were six naval servicemen killed taking this radio station. And it's good if you're interested. You can get a lot of information about that. But at the time, when this was going on, Australia's first submarine, AE-1, was part of this fleet that went up to take Rabaul. AE-2 didn't even come out to Australia, I don't think. It stayed in Europe and ended up being scuttled in the Dardanelles. Now, AE-1 was in Rabaul, in the port where we're going, and it went out for a training exercise, and on the 14th of September 1914, and it went out and disappeared. And that's it there. It was the crew of all the officers on that submarine were made up of British naval officers, and the seamen were made up of Australians, and there was one New Zealander as part of that crew on the AE-1. Now it just disappeared. What happened Christmas a couple of years ago? They found 103 years after it sank, it was rediscovered again. So we're actually, when we're going to Rabaul, When we go past the Duke of York Islands, and there, we're almost going over the top of where the AE-1 was found. So that was the First World War. Only 4 years of Papua New Guinea's involvement. And now we move into the war in the Pacific, another 4 years. Now, where you're going after tomorrow into Alito, it's the first place during World War II that the Japanese were actually defeated on land. And the Battle of the Coral Sea was the first time they were defeated on the sea. So when you get to Alito, you're treading on some pretty hallowed land there as far as the turning of the war in the Pacific. And it was Australian reservists that held the Japanese at bay, and then the Australian regulars went in and kicked their butts, as they say. But during the time you're there, the whole of the conflict during that time in the war in the Pacific, 216,000 deaths. That's Japanese, American, British, Indian, and Asian subcontinent. There were a lot of Indian, Asian subcontinent POWs were taken to Rabaul to dig the tunnels that they put the barges in and everything. A lot of Chinese taken there as well, and 99.9% of them died there. And if you go to Bidar Park Cemetery, as soon as you go in, there's all the Australian graves there. But if you go over to the back right-hand corner, you'll find an awful lot of headstones. They're actually facing east, and because they are Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus from the Indian subcontinent that are buried there, and their gravestones face at right angles to all the Australian ones. During the Second War, as the Japanese were retreating, they ended up going through a place like this. This is a place called the Yupna Gorge. This is the sort of terrain that they had to get through. Now, when my last presentation, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but you can see what the terrain's like. They were being harassed from the air. They were being chased along in a place called Shaggy Ridge in this area here, and there's a ravine here where it's called Seven Steps. It's just coming into view now. It's a ravine. There were 7 bush material ladders going down and 7 bush material ladders going up, and this was the shortcut for the local people. So the Japanese found this and decided that they would have to take that route to get to the other side. Now, we're talking about hundreds of Japanese trying to get through. They got there, and they were emaciated, starving. This is the ravine you can see now. And a lot of them committed suicide jumping off. A lot of them were just so emaciated they fell off these ladders. Those that managed to cross the ravine at the bottom and start climbing up the other side had the same problem. They just ran out of energy and fell off. But those that got to the top, as soon as their head and shoulders appeared over the top of the rise, the Papua New Guineans were on the other side with a big long bamboo pole, and they just stood there all day pushing the Japanese down into the ravine. The Japanese War Graves Commission came to visit where we were stationed, and they were finding the remains of as many Japanese soldiers as they could, so that they could account for them and tick them off and let the family know that their remains had been found. They went to this ravine, and they got at least 300 different soldiers were actually killed in that ravine. They collected up all the human remains, and they had a cremation, and just down from where we used to live there's now a little memorial to all the Japanese that were killed there. And that's a place called Sidor, and I'll point that out to you tomorrow in one of the presentations. But here's another thing for you trivia buffs. the only poisonous bird, the pitahui. It's a poisonous bird, not venomous, poisonous. The difference between venomous and poisonous. Venomous, they bite you. Poisonous, you bite it. And this particular bird is like the poison dart frog. You know, you get the arrow or the blowpipe, whatever it is, you rub it against the creature and it knocks them off. So that's that one. Now, whilst I have a wee bit of a rest, I'll show you this. Everybody remember this TV program? Can we help?
Very special Can We Help? This, my friends, is our 100th episode, and we have something a little different for you. We've broken free of the studio to where magic occurs. We're going to see what happens next with two of our most remarkable lost and found stories. Come on! Jonas Ramone shared with us a very emotional journey, and his reunion with his mum was unforgettable. Later on, we'll find out just how that relationship has blossomed. John Hocknull asked for our help to find some old friends in Papua New Guinea who had a massive impact on his life. When he came back home, he was so touched, he decided he had to do something. We'll have that story for you in a while.
Yeah, we met John Hocknull last year. He asked us if we could help him make his dream come true. Let's see what happened. These images, filmed more than 30 years ago, are of the Huli people in Tari, a small village in the southern highlands of Papua New Guinea. A place John and Morag Hocknull called home for 4 years.
It was definitely a culture shock, but we were there to live a life experience that really cannot be replaced.
The year was 1973. And John had just taken up an Australian government offer to become a local administrator, otherwise known as a Kiab. On paper, a Kiab's role was to help govern the fragmented and often warring groups of villages and help pave the way for a transition towards independence. In reality, the Kiabs had a hand in everything, from running the bank and post office to the justice system.
I was a commissioned police officer that actually told the policemen to go off and investigate and arrest people, and then I was actually the officer in charge of the calaboose, the little lockup that we had, so I actually had to look after the prisoners that I'd convicted. And that's the type of work we did.
John and Morag haven't been back to Tari since they left in 1977 and asked for our help to find out how the village has fared. In particular, what became of three very close friends, Stephen, Jacinta and Hogogo, the second in charge of the village.
Hogogo was a real character. He was a bit of a political mover and shaker in the area, and a very, very astute guy. Learnt Pidgin English very, very quickly. I only hope that Hogogo is still alive, because I'd really like to go and shake his hand. Because he was a real character.
When we began our search, the hope was all three were alive. The difficulty was in communicating with an area so remote. The breakthrough came when a local gas and oil company identified Stephen, and we were able to arrange for John and Morag's return flight to Tari.
I've got absolutely no idea how we as a family are remembered by the Huli people. No idea at all. I'm John here.
Stephen Lielu.
Hi, Stephen. Well done.
Stephen, Hogogo and Jacinta are all there to greet them.
Oh, this is brilliant. I'm overwhelmed with the reception.
Despite the joy of the reunion, John soon learns the reality of life in Tari today. Unfortunately, very few of the roads, bridges, small hospitals or schools they set up still operate.
When we had set up that provincial government and then all this, we thought that they would give us money to maintain the plantations and roads and bridges, all this, but now money goes to the forget long all now. So it's long, people know that, so. And also now, that's why over something broke down.
Eagle baggy, These are some top people, but it doesn't sound as though the government really takes much notice of them, unfortunately. Yes, it's a pity. I'm happy I came. I'm glad the people here have got good memories of us. That's an important thing, and I only wish a lot more could be done.
When John returned to Australia, his desire to help the community only intensified. In particular, he felt the need to provide for the schools that had suffered from a decade of social unrest and governmental neglect.
I was told that the libraries in the schools had either been destroyed, or because they closed a lot of the schools down, the books just deteriorated through lack of use and care and maintenance, and they just didn't have any library resources.
Using his skills as a professional fundraiser, John was determined to make a difference.
I made a few calls to a few of my colleagues and said, look, do you happen to have old uniforms? Are you replenishing your library? Do you have any school resources that you don't want? And just from those few phone calls, they said, yes, we've got this material. Just sent some letters down from the school.
What John modestly describes as materials was in fact $50,000 worth of donated goods, including 2.5 tons of books, 20 computers, tables, chairs and school uniforms. To get it all to PNG, John called in a very old favour.
When I was in Papua New Guinea working there, I was on the coast, and I actually rescued one of the shipping company's small coastal traders from being broken up on the reef, and I had a letter from the company saying thanks very much, and if there's anything I can do, let us know. I mean, this letter was 32, 33 years old, so I dragged the letter out and I rang them up and I said, hey, what do you reckon? And they said, wow, this is amazing. Yes, we'll help you. So they shipped the container at no cost.
The resources were distributed between 21 schools in the area, and the local pathology centre was provided with its only computer. John wasn't there for the delivery, but the letters of thanks and photos he's received show how much the gifts were appreciated.
The benefits of receiving the books in particular for the youngsters is going to be immeasurable, because it's a resource that they didn't have. B, they're desperate to learn English. These resources have increased the number of opportunities available to these kids.
When we first met John Hocknull last year, it was really clear to me that 3 hours in that community was not going to be enough, that he was frustrated and wanted to do something.
Some people just make you feel like you don't do enough sometimes, don't they?
Yeah, his commitment's fantastic, and it's not about charity.
Not just a matter of charity.
Yeah, I think the concern is if it's charity, then the community doesn't develop. So he's trying to establish some real business and educational links between the community and Brisbane. So good luck to John. It's a great thing he's doing.
Thank you, Jeff. Well done. Over the years, we've had many experts on the show.
Oh, that was 2008. And the middle of next month there'll be two containers going up, and I think there's about something pretty close to 200 computers, dentist chairs, hospital beds, crutches, wheelchairs, you name it. It's in these bits of containers. Not just me, but quite a few people that have been on cruise ships have also been involved in helping out. So if you feel you'd like to get involved, see me later and I'll tell you what we can do. But since 2008, this has happened in the same area. They've developed the gas. There's gas in the Tari area, and so there's this huge economic development with natural gas going out there. And this is where I used to patrol. We've got this massive gas conditioning plant there now, and they take the gas out of the ground, condition it, and send it down to Port Moresby in a pipeline, and then they process it there and send it off to Japan mainly. But to actually build that infrastructure there, that's a huge factory that built there. They had to get the stuff in, and there was no way they were going to build a road. So what did they do? They built an airstrip. Now, that airstrip says $500 million. We think it's near $2 billion by the time they actually built it. There's a 60-foot deep culvert in the middle of that airstrip. That airstrip is 300 metres longer than the airstrip in Port Moresby. It's the longest airstrip in the country, one way, and the reason that they built it was for this, to bring in 88 loads. That was all they wanted to do, was to fly in this aeroplane 88 times. It's the second largest freighter in the world. It's a Russian Antonov, and that's it landed, and it actually carries 200 tons. And this is the sort of equipment that was coming out of the belly of the beast. So to build that conditioning plant, they flew all that equipment in, and then they built the conditioning plant. So now they're processing the gas, and the gas is producing a reasonable amount of income for Papua New Guinea alone. There are currently some machinations as to whether they're getting enough royalties from it, and that's all up for negotiation at the moment. But currently, Papua New Guinea, the major exports is they probably fish a third of the world's tuna is caught in Papua New Guinea waters. The timber that goes out of there is horrendous because they're actually deforesting, whatever you say, large areas of Papua New Guinea, and the current government has decided that there are going to be no more round logs to be exported, because what was happening is they were going in and snaffling logs here, there and everywhere and putting it in with their quota and basically stealing the timber out from underneath them. So the government's changed that now to say the only thing that can be exported from Papua New Guinea is sawn timber. So what will happen is there's going to be 1,000 little sawmills pop up here, there and everywhere, and then the timber will be sawn and stamped, and the landowners will get their true royalties rather than having their timber stolen. But palm oil in Papua New Guinea doesn't have the same problems as palm oil has in Borneo and Indonesia, where it's actually devastating orangutans and the like. What they're doing in Papua New Guinea is they're replacing old colonial coconut plantations with old palm plantations. But they've got lots of other bits and pieces you can look at, and tourism. We're all doing our bit, as I try and convince passengers to change as much money as they can into kina and go ashore and spend. And that helps the economy, get some money out into the grassroots. Oh, by the way, if you don't have kina, they should get some kina on board in Alito. Don't worry about how much you're going to get, just buy what you can afford, because when you get back to Brisbane, if you've got kina left over, you can go to that currency exchange guy that was there yesterday, and he'll buy your kina off you, save you taking it home and trying to find somewhere to sell your kina later on. And he'll give you a good rate as well. But this is what else they do. They've got, they actually fly over day-old chicks from New Zealand into Port Moresby, and then they distribute them around the country. But chickens, cocoa, a lot of, this is cocoa here, cocoa beans, and those dried cocoa beans, a lot of those are going to Cadbury's in New Zealand. A lot of your soap has got coconut oil in it, and this is coconut drying. In Rabaul there's a huge shed at the wharf that we go to. The last time we were there it was full of. This is all dried copra, ready to be shipped off to the Philippines, I think. Coffee bushes, they've got heaps and heaps of coffee there. Really top quality coffee in Papua New Guinea. But on the 15th of September 1975, the Australian flag came down for the very, very last time in this particular area. And other than being married and having 2 sons, the third most important and proudest moment of my life was receiving this flag on the 15th of September. Because I knew that the following day, at 1 minute past midnight, Papua New Guinea was independent. And to the best of my knowledge, there's only 2 people have got video footage of receiving the Australian flag on Independence Day or Independence Eve. There's this handsome young man here and Prince Charles, who just happens to have been born in the same year as me. Well, that's Papua New Guinea. What we did, we had an old house there that we used as a clinic, and it needed replacing, so we pulled the whole thing down and built this huge bonfire, and had this massive bonfire. And from our house, opened all the windows, played bagpipe music, just trying to waken up all the locals. They'd all gone to bed, they didn't worry about independence. And then this is the following morning when the bigwigs came in from the main centre to start the celebrations of handing over the Papua New Guinea flag to the police to put on. Now, if you see in the background, there's the little boxes in the background there. Remember those, I'll tell you more about those a little bit later on. But this was the Independence Day, September the 16th. Now, at the same time, if you can have a look at this particular image, have a look right in the middle of the picture. Can you see anything right in the middle there? There's one little white lady. There was Morag, myself, our new son, who's only 5 months old, Morag's mum, and 75,000 Papua New Guineans. And that was on Independence Day. But in that, since then, they built that airstrip and built the conditioning plant. However, February last year, they had a 7.5 earthquake, and that split there on the left-hand image went the whole length of the runway. And they've since fixed that up, so that's all okay, but you can see all of the devastation here. Now, it wasn't so much just the landslides that they had there, but all of that dirt went into the river, and then that went downstream. And they make sago and everything there, and because the water was sort of torpid there, they weren't able to make their own food, basically, their taro. I didn't think that would. He's not silly. Okay. Will do. Urgent message, I'll let you know at the very end. So as you can see, there's more landslides and everything, so that sort of caused a few problems. Fortunately, because it's so isolated, the whole place is so isolated, there were only 100 deaths, considering the population there. But they dodged a bullet or two. But in 2016, I was asked to go back up to this particular area where the gas and everything else is, to officially open a huge 800-bed school and health centre. And the guy with the wig, shaking my hand there, at that time, he was the Minister for Finance of Papua New Guinea, at that time. And today, he's now the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea. And that's Morag, and I met him and his wife in the Sofitel Hotel in Brisbane 2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. So as you can see, we're both very fine figures of men there. And today, I'm actually twice the man I used to be. So that was me on patrol in Papua New Guinea. So the message that just came through was that when you get to conflict islands, it's only dollars. You take your dollars off the ship, you go and buy your vouchers. If you buy $10 worth of vouchers and you spend $7.50 of those $10 worth of vouchers, you are actually making a donation of $2.50 to the person, the man that owns conflict island, because you don't get a refund. I've just been informed that there are no refunds on the vouchers. Okay, so if you buy a voucher, spend it, or if you're going down the pontoon and somebody's coming off the pontoon and you've got $7.50 worth of vouchers, say, have a drink on me, and you go and they go and spend it whilst you're there. This afternoon at 3 o'clock I'll be up in the Blue Room, and I'll reinforce the message about the conflict islands and any other questions you want answered, just about anything. Tomorrow, please come and join me here at 1:15 again, and I'll run through all what I actually did, the work I did, living and working in an amazing country like Papua New Guinea. Morag will be on after we leave the conflict islands, and then the last day we've got my last presentation about customs cultural cannibalism. Anyway, if you've got questions, please come and see us in the Blue Room at 3 o'clock. Thank you very much indeed.